everyone. Thursday, May 16th. Good afternoon. Oh man. What a market. I felt like I ran a marathon trading today, but the market itself didn't even really move that much. It was just some of these crazy stocks. I'm an associate member of T3 Trading Group, which is an SEC registered broker dealer and member of FINRA SIPC. All of my trades are placed through T3 Trading Group. You should carefully consider whether trading is suitable for you in light of your own financial condition. Position disclosure. FFIE is new. I traded a ton of that today. I didn't keep a lot, but I kept a little bit, so I got a pretty good profit on it. I got some Jumai calls that I bought today. Some real lottos, 950 calls for next week, but just saw some more large order flow come in, and that was one of the orders that came in, so I just followed it. I've had decent success in my limited experience following some unusual flow so far, so we'll see if that turns into anything. And then I bought this BCAN like right after the close because I don't know, someone told me it's 103% short float and might be the next FFIE, which is a 96% short float to squeeze. So I don't know, it's a dollar stock. I usually don't trade these dollar stocks. I usually don't like them. But I said, you know what? In this market, I don't know, this market's gone crazy and just buy stuff and maybe it goes up a lot. And if it doesn't, what's the worst that happens with this? Lose a little bit and get out. But you know, maybe next thing I know, I wake up and it's at $4. So we'll see. Not normally how I trade. FFIE stock that's crossing over the $1 mark. Not something I normally trade. BCAN. I really don't like stocks as a general rule that trade less than $5. It's usually not what I want to focus on. But you know, this FFIE. Which I don't even think I've ever even really heard of today. And I traded it all day before I even looked up what type of company it is. I guess it's an electric car company. But this just seems to be the market environment that we've morphed into as there's been such loosening conditions out there. This was 4.5 cents 4 days ago. It went to $2.35 today. I don't know. They traded 1 billion shares, if I'm reading that right. I'm usually not used to reading numbers that big. Traded 1.092 billion shares today. Why not? Why not? Honestly, this FFIE, again, not normally what I trade, but where did I get involved in this? I got in when we saw the option flow hit, which was right here at 9:55. I really was in this all day. No wonder I felt like I ran a marathon. Yeah, 9:55 we saw the $4 calls go off, and that's just been the name of the game. You know, it's been these kind of gamma squeezes are coming back, and these loosening conditions, especially as this TLT is moving higher, kind of like we talked about. Me mania seems like it's back a little bit. They're squeezing the hell out of certain short stocks. This FFIE, I don't know, it's probably a zero, to be honest. It's probably worthless. Really got to pay attention, especially because I swung a little bit. I don't have very much. But really got to pay attention to see if they announce like a secondary offering, which will just wreck the stock immediately and probably be the end of the run. And it already trades insanely thick, but 94% short float, and stock has gone from 4 cents to $2.35 in a couple of days. They're just squeezing the heck out of everything right now. So I don't know. Those $4 calls went off. I kind of have a game plan to be long up till 3, and then I probably would actually start to build in very small to the short side above 3 and look to get heavy into 4 if it can get up there. I wish I remembered, and I'll probably just scroll up here in the VTF and look it up. I know it was about 9:55 a.m. this morning. I wish I remembered when those calls expire. I assume that they expire like either tomorrow or next week. But I should definitely know that. And if I see that they announce a secondary offering, I will get out of this thing as quickly as I possibly can, and also even consider shorting even at a lower price than I was initially looking for. But yeah, I mean, that just seems to be the name of the game right now. You know, GME took a hit back down into its equilibrium zone. Looks like it got hit into the close and hit a little bit after hours. I actually still have a little position in GameStop to the long side. I swung some yesterday, which obviously I lost money on what I kept overnight, but I traded it so well intraday that I was like, you know what, I'm still up money on this, so I'll stick with it a little bit longer, but I'm gonna keep it tight from here on out tomorrow. But yeah, obviously starting with GameStop and AMC, which now has also pulled back into its equilibrium zone. They're starting to squeeze stuff all over the place. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see if like these GameStops can give another leg, if they can really give another trade or not. And I kind of think that this trade's not fully done yet. Though I could definitely be wrong. I'm not in these things from a valuation fundamentals perspective, of course. But I kind of think that there could be another juicy little leg higher on this thing. I don't know if it'll necessarily break the absolute high that we saw of this rally, which during market hours I see is 64.83. Pre-market, I think we got up to like 70 or something. Definitely don't believe in these companies, but I think that it's a possibility that they shake some people out on the downside. They shake out the late players, and then maybe we get another squeeze up to $50 or something like that. So we'll see. It's been a really wild market environment, and the market itself is obviously really strong. So popping over to the market, we closed down a little bit today. We're down a little bit more after hours, very little. SPYs are down 0.25%. Qs are down 0.25%. IWM was the laggard, down 0.7%. Despite the fact that the TLT was strong for most of the day, though it did end up rolling over and closing flat to red. Despite that, the IWM was very relatively weak all day. And again, it was kind of a second day in a row of some of those growth companies that I would think would most benefit from an easing of interest rates actually being relatively weak. Though obviously there are still short squeezes that are taking place right now. Again, FFIE as kind of an example. But the game plan that we had coming into today, so, we noted that it was pre-market, we were set to have a gap up. By the time we opened, it was a very flat open. But it's like basically like a day 3 to the upside today. Short-term tactical was in the red zone, which does not mean to short so much as it means don't buy. The extension in the market hit the $9-10 in both the SPYs and the Qs yesterday, and pre-market at the highs, even with the ADMA catching up a little bit every morning. Pre-market at the highs, the Qs were again $9-10 worth of extension. So at these levels, obviously this market is very bullish. I mean, just look at the technicals. We're at all-time highs. Historically, what happens at all-time highs? The market tends to make more all-time highs, right? We tend to continue to move higher. So I am definitely really bullish on this market, but you've got to take that bullish tone of the market with some perspective that we are really extended. And that degree of extension means wait for a new setup to come in. Right? We had a big move higher here. I mean, we started the month at $500. Now today we are at 530 something. Getting extended to the upside. Let the market reset up. I'm bullish. I want to be long, but I can't responsibly buy any new positions really or any new stock. Fine. If it's a FFIE or something like that, that's maybe a totally different play. It's a short squeeze. It's not going to matter what the market does. But anything that is related to the market, I don't want to be involved with new longs in this degree of extension. It just sets you up for a really bad risk reward. And if anything, this degree of extension has been a consistent signal to book profit on longs and to hedge those longs. And what are we hedging for? We're hedging for the price time correction that actually creates the long setup that you want to buy. So I didn't keep my TQQQ short. I closed it into the close. But, it's just been a really consistent trade to be able to build into that a little bit and kind of trade it back and forth when you get to this degree of extension, and it kind of pads your P&L, or pads at a minimum the extension risk on a long portfolio when we get to this area. So that's pretty much where we're at. Market's super bullish, but the degree of extension said, hey, let's not buy. It also said, either be very patient on shorts and look for a signal, or build into those shorts slowly, which was more of my focus. And we want to wait for a new setup to actually come into the market that we can buy. Whether that's a higher low pivot, a downside continuation hammer, a bull flag, I'm not exactly sure. It's to be seen. But I definitely know that when short-term tactical is in that red zone and the market is $9-10 away from the ADMA on the daily chart, and we've ripped from 500 to 530, and it's a day 3, that as bullish as I am, this is not where you want to buy. So I think for probably most people, most traders today, unless you were trading a couple of these crazier names like that FFIE, it was probably a very boring day. The market really spent the entire day just digesting those gains. And we tried to push higher a little bit in the beginning of the day, but again, that short-term tactical, if you're trying to push in the beginning of the day with short-term tactical in the red, I don't think I've ever seen that actually continue. Usually, like I said in the morning meeting, when you get continuation higher on a day when short-term tactical is in the red, it's usually because they spend the first half of the day going sideways or pulling back, which very quickly gets it out of that red zone, then create a midday pivot low, and then give you that upside continuation where you can get 2 or 3 or 4 days in a row of short-term tactical in the red zone. But instead, we pushed higher early, and that, I don't think I've ever seen that get sustained on a morning where we're already reading that the short-term tactical is in the red zone, which, we work in a game of probabilities. You're in this business long enough, anything that can happen will happen, but it would be a very low probability situation for this market to just continue the way that it did this morning and then just continue through the rest of the day and just, follow through on yesterday's 5-minute trend to the upside. It'd be very low probability. So not surprising at all that kind of failed down a little bit of an intraday break lower at 120. I think one of the Fed members was speaking at that time, and we closed a little bit weak. So at the end of the day, we have a little bit of an upside tail here, which signals further price and time correction is needed for this market, which just makes plenty of sense right now. So we'll assess how we got tomorrow, and we'll assess if tomorrow is a day where we can look to be a little bit more aggressive again. But I got a feeling that with a flat or even a small down open, we'll still be kind of in no man's land of extension. The move has been so big so fast that we probably need a couple of days, a few days to digest these gains in order to really be able to get continuation. And just keep in mind that markets tend to work in periods of expansion and consolidation over time. We have been in an expansion period to the upside for most of this month, but we're probably due for getting some sort of corrective action, some consolidation action. So we'll see how that plays out. It's pretty much all that I got. From a trading perspective today, it was really just about managing positions that I'm already in. AMD into the upside continuation, eventually rolled down and failed a little bit. It's an interesting kind of topping tail. NVIDIA was weaker than AMD throughout the day, so kind of managing the AMD positioning, managing this Jumai position, which closed at almost the exact same price that it closed at yesterday, but enabled me to sell some stock up on the way to 7, rebuy some of that stock back down in the afternoon. So continuing to stick with that trade, and then just traded a boatload of this FFIE like an absolute maniac today. I haven't watched the tape so closely in such a thick stock in a long time. But I mean, you can see what my day was focused on. This is why I feel like I ran a marathon today. But it worked out. We'll see what it can do. Still a little bit long. That's all I got. I am happy to answer any questions that any of you guys may have. Sorry. All right. From Cody, I was being patient with the short side of the market today, expecting some sort of pull as we discussed. Instead of shorting the Qs, I decided to short Meta at 11.05. versus the recent pivot high. Okay. Shorted a Meta at 11.05. Okay. Looks like it worked all right for you. Yeah, so we talked about, Meta as it approaches 480 is one of the ones that you could have on your list to go to for a short if the market's at that more extreme extension. And then on top of that, the Meta didn't really give an entry versus 480 today. The reason for that was because it was relatively weak because it had some sort of negative news out this morning. So I like your stock selection. As far as the trade execution goes, 11:05, not the best time of the day, but breaking down on a little bit of a wedge as the 1580 EMA probably caught up. You can see that just with the 21 EMA on my 5-minute chart here. So you shorted some, was relatively weak all day. Sometimes I feel like the timing a full short on an overbought market is tough. I agree, and that's why I tend to build into those shorts instead of trying to really mark like the specific top with size on a tight stop loss. I try to more build into those index level shorts and get heavier as extension becomes more and more and more, and then lighter as extension becomes less. So I don't have to, perfectly time those counter trend shorts. And then I will, if I do see a signal, I will take the trade. Take it as a bigger ad with a tighter stop loss or something like that, which I won't allow to affect the game plan on the original position that I have on. So sometimes those trades do show themselves, but generally I agree with you. It could be a little bit better to kind of build in, build out. Ended up covering all of my stock by the low of the day, thankfully. Although the overall market and some other stocks ended up having bigger sell-offs, is shorting relative weakness in this scenario a safer approach than trying to catch a big move lower in the indices. Yeah, I always like the idea of short and relative weakness. I mean, you're adding an additional layer of probability on the side of your trade. So if we want to quantify safer as higher probability of success, then I would say yes. You're going after something that's relatively weak. I like the index shorts for me personally because I usually have a long portfolio on. It's hedging that out a little bit. I don't need to be perfect with my execution, like I was saying. I can build in, build out. And while I agree that it's probably generally going to be better to short the relatively weak stock, then you are taking some degree of individual stock risk, and you never know what can happen. News can come out, or out of nowhere, the stock can become relatively strong. So yes, generally I agree with you. It's probably higher. You have an extra layer of probability on your side, or even two, because there was news and relative weakness by shorting Meta versus shorting the Qs. But then also realize that you are taking on some individual stock risk that you don't have necessarily if you're shorting the Qs. So hope that helps. From Jim, I figured AMD was the natural counter trend short with a ton of overhead supply. I had pretty high conviction on the trade, but ultimately I got chopped up on the way up, capitulating at the top. I had size on, and I know that was my main issue here, but I wanted to have enough shares. I just couldn't get my one-to-ones. How many attempts would you typically give a trade like this if you have conviction? And then you're giving me a little chart here. I assume that red dots are shorts and blue dots are buys. Is that what I'm reading here? Or are those indicators of some sort? Red dots are shorts. It looks like you shorted at the high. A little tough to read the chart, but I understand the concept of your question. So I'm just kind of rereading part of it. You had pretty high conviction that you wanted to short this name. To me, that's tricky. I mean, this was the most relatively strong stock that you possibly could have found out there. It was super strong in the beginning of the day. It was stronger than the market. It was given continuation. So you are fighting a little bit of relative strength. I do understand your thought process, though, as this thing extends higher, as this stock has been trending down, that there are going to be sellers on the way up here who are thankful to be able to get out of their position, and that kind of creates some overhead supply on the trade. It's tough. So, you know, if you're, I would consider this to be a counter trend trade. Counter trend on, so that's the first thing we need to classify, right? Do we consider this to be a counter trend trade or a with trend trade? I would consider this to be a counter trend trade. I could see you making the argument that it's a with trend trade just because of this daily chart, but I kind of think that the downtrend broke yesterday. So I would say that the daily chart at this point is more neutral. It's probably arguably trendless, and the small time frame is trending higher. So therefore, you are going counter trend on the small time frame, and a stock that on the bigger time frame is probably a little bit more neutral. And a neutral stock or range bound stock does generally mean, you know, short highs and kind of buy lows, and that's how you work a range. And obviously the way that it gets to those highs that you're shorting is because it worked its way up intraday, or you get to those lows that you're buying, it's because it worked its way down intraday. So if you're doing that, you're always kind of going a little bit counter trend, but you know the big picture can be on your side a little bit. So definitely understand the thesis. As far as like how many trades or how many tries I give something, it depends on the trade setup. Like I need to have a setup. I try to be very cautious on new entries, on like new trades. Oh, sorry, let me rephrase that. I try to be very cautious on re-entering trades after I get stopped out of things, because there's a fine line between, you know, taking a new trade in a stock that you already lost money in because the new trade is a good trade, and fighting the stock because you think that your idea is right, but you got pushed out and you're just kind of being stubborn. So there's kind of a fine line there. So I always really want to make sure that I have like an actual trade set up for my short execution, or short execution in this case, in order to get back involved in a trade. So I don't know, there's a potential trade here off this upside hammer with this extension, maybe a potential trade off this pivot high. So there's a few potential trades here. So as long as you're taking legitimate trades, I think it's okay to keep going back to that well. And those are kind of your options. You know, you either can say, hey, I need to wait for a signal, and I'm going to take, you know, almost similar to what I was just talking about with Cody, and I'm going to take some real size here to the short side, in which case you got to be able to stop yourself out quickly and then reassess and look for a new trade setup, or just be done with it entirely. Or you're very small and you're just kind of building in based on a bigger picture thesis and thought process to the point where you're not so heavy that you're forced to capitulate at a certain price point, like at highs today, where it's noon and there's a lot of extension on the 15-minute chart, and at a minimum you're due for a $2 plus pullback off of the extension highs. So I kind of think that you need to do one or the other, and you don't want to be putting yourself in the position where you're so heavy, or you're forcing it so many times that you then can't deal with the position and kind of get out. Yeah, so if you're being super precise with your entries, which means that you're also being super precise with the stop loss, that's fine. And then again, you can go back to it when you get stopped out, as long as a new trade in the name presents itself that is on the side of your thought process. But you got to make sure that there's a new trade there, or otherwise, you need to just be smaller and kind of be willing to scale in a little bit. I personally think that shorting AMD is very difficult today. I understand your thesis, but this thing was just so strong after the open, and so strong after yesterday was really just a day one break. Like if it could have closed well again today and then was up again tomorrow, then now we're talking about like a day three where there is probably a bunch of overhead supply like you're talking about. That would give me a little bit more conviction. But the opening strength in this thing I think was a little bit tricky. The market definitely wasn't going to be super strong today to fight your trade and help this out further. So yeah, I hope that helps. Popping over to the YouTube, I have two trade ideas that I want your opinion on. This is from Gabriel. Oil and gas, FTI. It's a stock. I don't think I'm very familiar with this name. Technip. Okay, so FTI is number 1 here. It's an oil and gas stock with solid fundamentals and a decent pattern. I agree, it is definitely a decent pattern. Higher lows and equal highs, looking long over 27-ish. Yeah, for sure. That's your breakout of a nice pattern here with the 50 SMA catching up, which I don't have on this chart, so I'll take your word for it. Yeah, you have a nice 2-month consolidation here. It's tightening up. 27 is the breakout. I'm all for it. And then the other one is the CCJ, which this name I'm definitely familiar with. I find this stock to be very tricky to trade. I saw institutions were buying calls on uranium for the summer. Yeah, we saw a little bit of that today too. Look at the URA weekly. Yeah, this weekly's got like a beautiful cup and handle here. It's a beautiful cup and handle continuation pattern above 3250. This URA weekly looks really good. CCJ has been relatively strong to it. Look at that move. It's pretty impressive on the weekly. Above 50, if it can really hold up there, would be looking pretty nice. I didn't even read that you wrote that there's a big cup and handle on the URA weekly. I just saw it myself, obviously. It's kind of choppy above 50, 50, 50, but it can break out if volume comes. Yeah, so we definitely, there's obviously a lot of interest right now in uranium generally. It's been that way for a little while. So yeah, I like the idea. I just find these names. I've traded these stocks. I've traded the CCJ in the past. I find it very difficult, this stock. I've tried to buy highs in this thing, and I don't think I've ever made money. So I would just note that. I'd be a little bit careful buying highs for momentum in this thing. It doesn't typically seem to pan out, just based on my experience. So we'll see how that goes. OpenAI partnering with Reddit. Is Reddit up decent after hours? I had a bid at $56 to get back into Reddit today, and it closed on lows at $56.38. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'll probably get filled tomorrow. And now I'm not going to. It's up $3 off that headline without me. From Robert. What's your trade plan behind TRSG? Yeah, I haven't really spoken about that one because it's super, super thin. I don't know. It's a recent IPO. It's very low float. It's a Chinese company, and we have seen that randomly a lot of these Chinese companies that have these very low floats end up going up like 500% at a certain point after their IPO. So I've just been kind of managing a small position. I don't want to call it small. We'll call it a medium-sized position. I've been managing a medium-sized position in this TRSG for well over a week now, to see if it just catches one of those bids at a certain point. I'll look to really add above like 680 to 7 as a spot, and then $8 is the big level. So basically I'm managing this as a little bit of a lotto ticket to see if it wakes up one day and becomes just one of these. It's very consistently, we've seen it happen a lot over the course of the last year, and usually I feel like we're super late to it, where it's like, oh, this crazy Chinese low float recent IPO is up 500% today. Are we going to chase some price up here even though the thing is probably worthless? And most of the time we avoid it. Once in a while we'll day trade it a little bit. And when I saw this thing and it noted that it's just got a 1 million share float, and it kind of fits the mold of a lot of those names that we've seen go, I kind of built into a little bit of a position to see if it could break out, which it has not. The last 2 days of price action have made me a little bit nervous on it, to be honest. So I'm going to keep probably a tight leash on this thing on the downside. But I want to see if it breaks out, and it would be stupid thin if it started to go. Like it'd be one of these ones where if you weren't watching it the moment it takes off, it's going to be at $10 and you're not even going to be able to get any stock because it's going to be trading with a 90-cent spread, and hopefully then it's just at 20. and it worked out for me. So that's just kind of been the thought process. It's also not usually how I trade, and it's very thin, so I've been kind of avoiding talking about this one a little bit. But I guess you noticed it in my disclosure, so I'm busted. But always happy to talk about anything, so if that helps. Talking about trading volume in this name and long-term sideways price action. Gotcha. From Ben. Wondering if you could speak to the relatively lower volume on the indices. Honestly, you pointing this out is kind of the first I've noticed it. It doesn't seem drastic to me where it's a problem. So you can see here that, the relative volume has kind of died out a little bit here in the month of May. So can I speak to that? Sure. I don't really have much to say about it, though, to be honest. So we say volume is confirmation. Like, if you see a move that's happening, a stock that's breaking, whatever, and it's happening on big volume, that's confirmation. It's a layer of probability that will help to confirm the move. It's a layer of probability that will make you more inclined to want to get into it because momentum needs volume. But trends and grinds don't. And while we've had a pretty big move here and we have had enough momentum to get to $10 of extension in this market, it hasn't. It's been a little bit more of a grind outside of getting hit with some occasional news. So I don't think that you have to have volume to go up. I mean, this was a big complaint. I think it was back in 2013, which if I remember correctly was the year that the S&P was up 33%, something like that. And all year, the perma bears were complaining about how the rally can't be real because there's no volume confirmation. Volume has been super light, and it didn't matter. And I've seen markets at all-time highs, and markets just continue to go higher and higher and higher that don't have huge amounts of volume coupled with them. So I don't think that it is the end of the world. I don't think that we have to be having bigger volume or equal volume in order for this move higher to actually be real. But it is something to note that it's not there. But it wouldn't be a reason for me to think that this rally can't continue. So appreciate the question. From Gabriel, did you change your thesis on how to enter BABA again? It looks like it might emerge into a bull market. China stimulus, hedge funds buying, Saudis buying. Annoyed that I didn't re-enter into 78. I was being patient and waiting for sideways chop before re-entering, but I got bid back up right away after earnings. No, I haven't changed my thesis at all on Alibaba. I'm very bullish on it. I'm bullish on the China trade. I've still got a really nice position in JD that I held into the earnings report today. From the beginning, I said that BABA was the position that I was being more aggressive on for a lower price target, whereas JD I'm being a little bit less aggressive on for a bigger target. So I've followed that game plan perfectly. I made a lot of money in Alibaba this year. It's one of my better names on the entire year, but my target on it was really only 80. And then the adjustment to the game plan is as it gets above 80, I'm willing to some degree to trail new buys based on the money that I've already made off of the 80 MA on the daily chart. So I had bids out in Alibaba today to get back in, and at lows they didn't quite get hit. It just is what it is. But I'll pull back to the 80 MA on Alibaba. I will most likely be buying unless the stock is just above 100 very soon, and I'm not going to chase too much. But no, I still really like it, and again, I'm in JD. I still have a decent position in JD, and I'm looking for a move into the low 40s on this, which I've been saying since it was in the low 20s. So if I get that, it'll be I'm looking for a 100% move off the March low basically in JD. So I think I'm being pretty greedy overall. Yeah, so for me, for BABA, if you're asking about how I'm going to look to re-enter, it just I'll buy a dip based on where the ADMA is and risk some of the money that I've already made to see what kind of continuation I can get. Appreciate the question. Okay, cool. It looks like I got through everything in the VTF and in the YouTube, so we'll wrap it up there. Have a great night, everyone. I'll see you all tomorrow.